Well, good day, everybody. It's another day, and I am actually working on a project where I'm picking up stitches on the sides of this front panel, stitches on each side, and I'll show that in another video. But okay, so today's video is about the PSSO, which is the, see if I can remember, pass, slip, stitch, over. Basically, you're taking a stitch that you've slipped onto your right side of needles and you're passing it over the next knitted stitch. So I have run into problems with that when I was first learning how to do it. And the problems I ran into is I would have a lost stitch, or I'd end up knitting two stitches together because I had difficulty recognizing just which stitch I was knitting on the return row. Okay, you know what? That's going to be more easily understood as you listen and watch the video that I have. So I show you how to do it, and I show you how to avoid some of the mistakes with it. The other thing is I got thinking about, every time I was passing the stitch over, I was thinking about Passover. How does that relate to our life? So from a psychology perspective, it is sort of passing over life events, meaning that we're avoiding them. And I'm going to talk about that and how to maybe not do that so that you can have more freedom and peace in your life and resilience. So it's going to be about knitting the stitches of resiliency into your life. Okay, so I make these videos on a Tuesday and then I edit them, which takes me at least half a day. I'm kind of getting used to that pattern. And I upload them on a Wednesday morning because I usually am working part-time Wednesday morning. So it's a good time to set up my iPad, just let it upload, and off I go. I come home, do the finishing touches, and then you have a video to watch. So thanks for tuning in. Thanks to new subscribers. I'm so glad that you're here. And let's continue on and see what we've got. The particular pattern that I am working on requires me to do a yarn forward stitch, and then I slip the next stitch, then I knit the next stitch, and then I have to take the slip stitch and pass it over the knit stitch. Now this yarn is actually a linen cotton blend, and it's a little bit wiry, a little bit difficult to work with. So basically a PSSO is a slip stitch, then you knit the next one, and then you pass that slip stitch over the knit stitch. That's it in a nutshell. Let me just show that to you again. This time I'm using a worsted weight wool, which makes it a little bit easier to see the stitches. I'm also trying to record this while my laptop is sitting on my lap. So I'm reaching in front of the laptop to record it. So it's a little bit jittery, but here we go. So I slip the first stitch and knit the next one, and then I take the slip stitch and I pull it over. Come on, you can do this. Pull it over, get it in there, and pull it over the knitted stitch. Sometimes when you're trying to do that, the needles are not cooperating, the wool is not cooperating, it gets split. At any rate, slip stitches, or the PSSO is slip the stitch, knit the next one, and pass it over. So every time I'm working on this, and it's funny because it's previous to Easter, I keep thinking Passover, which is a religious holiday. So I'm just going to continue knitting on here, because what that Passover stitch does is it creates a little eyelet for you, a little hole in your work, which, you know, you have enough of them, you can create a pattern. So my pattern calls for the yarn forward. Not all PSSOs are like that. Slip stitch, knit the stitch, and I keep my thumb on because otherwise the two stitches, the pass over yarn or the yarn over yarn, can get mixed up with the slip stitch. And then when you're trying to knit it later on, when you're in the return row, you can either double up or you end up knitting the two together so you get a misstitch, or sometimes it's a slip stitch. It gets lost in the work, so you got to go pick it up. So here we are, yarn over, slip the stitch, knit the stitch, get that needle in there, pull it up, and if you're lucky you can do this the first time. Oops. And you slip it over the needle like that. There you go, that's how you do it. And then you knit on. Now, in the return row, and I'm just using a garter stitch, which is a straight knit each row. When you knit back, that's when you begin to see your work. And you learn to watch your stitches carefully so you can distinguish the knit ones where with the slipped or yarn over stitches. This might look like a mistake, like, oops, we got an extra stitch there. No, you don't. You just knit it. I know it looks a bit weird, but you knit it, and that creates the little eyelet effect. So you learn to recognize what your stitches look like, so that can help you avoid mistakes. So I knit across this row, knit, 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 turn my work over. Fortunately, there's only like 10 stitches on here. Continuing with the garter stitch, I just knit the next row. I don't bother purling it. Now this is a little bit easier to knit because everything looks like an actual knit stitch. And you just go across. You see the little eyelet there forming? I've got 2 of them. Not bad, eh? And as you do this, your tension gets even as well. The more you do it, the more practice you have, the more experience you get, the more even your stitches are, and your work turns out quite nice. And that's the goal, isn't it? To have it look nice. But I always say, you're knitting. You're not a machine. You can always tell store-bought knitting because it is perfect. Whereas when you're knitting something for yourself or for a family member, little mistakes are okay. It's a testament to the hand knit aspect of what you're doing. So I hope that helps you illustrate or helps you understand how the knit passover stitch goes, the PSSO. How can the PSSO, the Passover stitch, relate to living? The psychological aspects. What does it mean to pass over a life event? It could mean that we ignore it. It's stressful or painful and we just don't want to face it or admit that it occurred. We may be able to ignore it for a while, but it will come back. Past life events have a way of showing up unannounced. Sometimes they show up with intent and emotion. It's as if the event is saying, hey, remember me? You can't hide from me forever. And at some point, we do need to deal with it. Process the thoughts and feelings, as I mentioned in my previous video. The next stressful pull on you like never before event is divorce. The third life event is moving. I have moved 36 times in my lifetime so far. I didn't initiate most of those moves. My father was a gambler, and we were often on the run because of creditors. My first husband had mental health issues, which we weren't aware of in the beginning of the marriage. In fact, it wasn't really diagnosed and admitted to until near the end of the marriage. But with the mental health issues and his restless soul, we moved often, and it was always his choice. I've owned 3 homes in my lifetime, all during the restless mental health years in my first marriage. At the end of that marriage and into a new fulfilling marriage, I rent. If I moved, it was because the landlord came to the house and let us know that he was selling. So again, not my choice. I've experienced all 3 of the most stressful life events mentioned, and you probably have as well. And yet, here's something I don't think is talked about much. We all have this amazing ability to be resilient. Resilience is the inner strength we draw upon to help us adapt, adjust, and process our life events. So, what helps us to be resilient? We can summarize and create a positive banner over our life, categorize the events in a more positive light, and I did mention that in my previous video. So, for example, 17 years in an abusive marriage. Well, yes, it was abusive, and we can acknowledge that. But it can also be categorized as 17 years in the school of resiliency. Well, why would we even want to put that kind of label on our life? Doesn't it seem rather stupid? Isn't it a kind of passing over, ignoring life events, trying to stuff it away, pretending it wasn't what it was? You could view it that way. However, wouldn't it be better to remind yourself how resilient you are? How negative life events with their stress suggested for a while, maybe left you feeling that it was all going to wear you down, but how it actually stirred up your natural strengths of resiliency? If you're aware of that when you're going through difficult events, it can be a strength that you can draw on and lean on. So how can we become resilient? We can take on a positive perspective, which can come in time, usually through retrospect, not necessarily as we're going through a difficult time. We can view the event as a challenge, as opportunity. We can focus on the things that you can control or effect change over. We can remind ourselves that we are resilient. We do have that ability. We have that quality to bounce back. When you remind yourself that you are resilient, you will have less of a tendency to pass over or ignore difficulties. You'll feel stronger as you go through life difficulties, which means you become a fast processor. The knitting stitches of resiliency. They include confidence. You gain that as you go along. Optimism. It's often a choice. Flexibility. Acceptance. Personal strength. More peace in life. Greater freedom. And then you gain a greater sense of value with the life that you live. Thanks once again for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. And, my hope is that I'm getting better at videotaping and narrating and sharing content as I go along. So it's all a learning process. And life is a learning process. So do something kind for yourself today, because why wait around for somebody else to do that? Sorry about that. Anyways, enjoy your day, and we'll see you the next time.